Aloha and welcome everyone to the Fit2Fat2Fit Experience podcast. It's me, your host, Drew Manning. I really appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode. Today's guest is Jessica Zweig. She is the author of a new book called The Light Work. And on this podcast, she kind of jumps in and shares her story with me about her rise to a successful entrepreneur, selling a seven-figure business, but feeling empty inside. And I think a lot of us have been there, especially if you had a lot of success. You realize that the success and the money is not what makes you happy. And then she went on this trip to Egypt, which she talks about this spiritual awakening that she had on this trip to Egypt, which was very profound, very deep. You can tell it was very transformative for her on a personal level. And now she is on a mission to empower other women, especially, but also men as well, find their purpose in life. And I really love her message and what she stands for. Um, and I believe that someone like this is very important to have in the world of entrepreneurship because a lot of people hustle and grind and they kind of lose themselves and they lose their identity in the hustle and the grind, thinking that if I just hustle more and grind more, then eventually I'll get to this place of happiness and freedom. And I love her message about this. So, really excited to introduce you guys to her. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Paloova. Paloova is a new shoe company created by Mark Sisson, who's the grandfather of the paleo movement and author of many books. He created a shoe company. It's a zero drop minimalist shoe that has a unique 5-toe design. So each toe has its own slot, and it's a wide toe box as well. This is the perfect shoe for rucking, you guys. You guys know I'm a huge fan of rucking, and this is my go-to shoe for rucking, just because it feels very natural on my foot. It's very comfortable, and I love the way it feels when I either ruck and walk, or when I do my ruck shuffling, which is kind of like a slow jog with the rucksack on. That's safe. And I put this to the test. Put in lots of miles on these shoes, and yeah, they look different with the 5-toe slots that they have, but honestly, it feels great, and I love it. And so I'm a huge, huge fan now, and that's why they're the sponsor of this podcast. So if you go to Paloova, Peluva.com, you can use my code Drew for 15% off if you're someone that wants to find a shoe that actually helps your feet and helps with the form when it comes to walking or running. You can even wear them around the house. But I'm a huge fan. Go check them out, Paloova.com. Use the code Drew, DREW, for 15% off. And with that, let's go hang out with Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing, Drew. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Congratulations on your second book.
Thank you. You
I know
get
it's not
it.
easy work. Yeah, I know it's not easy work. And we'll dive into the light work. I'm really excited to dive into the book with you. But really quick, would love to introduce you to my audience. And one of the first questions I ask people when they come on is if you could connect the dots for us and tell us those experiences that you've had growing up that have shaped you a
Hmm.
certain way into becoming
Well,
who you are today. And as you know, whatever you're comfortable with sharing,
yeah.
maybe talk about some like pivotal moments, some experiences that really shaped you and kind of led you down this path of who you are today, this version of you.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you two things that come to
Okay.
mind. The first is when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I
Hmm.
was old enough to understand my surroundings or to see, and assess this area I was living in. My mom was in the front seat of her like beaver station wagon. I had my little brother who was like at the time 4 or 5, and he was also becoming aware of his surroundings.
Hmm.
And we grew up in a very affluent community, and my parents were modest, self-made people. And I remember my brother saying, Mommy, look at all these big houses," because we were driving around this neighborhood where all the wealthiest people lived. And I
Yep.
remember my mom, we were in the back seat driving her beaver station wagon. She turned her head and she said, Doug and Jessica, it's not the houses that are important. It's the people who live in those houses that are
Hmm.
important. And I just remember growing up in so much affluence and being, going to school with clothes from TJ Maxx, and like my mom and dad just always raising us with values of compassion and humanity, and that no one is better than anyone because they have money or because they live in a fancy house or drive a fancy car. And I really am grateful to my parents for giving me those values and morals from a very young age. I also, because I was sort of this gawky, not cool kid, I suffered a lot of bullying and,
Mm,
you know, trauma from mean girls. Girls are meaner
yeah.
than boys. And I never had a clique. I never felt like I belonged. I never felt pretty. The boys never asked me out. The girls never invited me to their parties. And
Mm,
so I really struggled to feel a sense of community and belonging most of my young adult life. And it wasn't until I became an entrepreneur and started creating my own businesses that are really designed for women. I mean, I obviously welcome men into my platform, but I realized that I sort of created what I wanted and what I had been
mm,
missing most of my life, which is like safety in being myself and being in sisterhood and having women who accepted me. I mean, that's really been a huge driver in why I do what I do in the way that I do it, which is really founded upon humanity and depth and not, um, you know, teaching women or caring myself about external, but
yeah.
what's really inside that matters the most.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I have two daughters that are going through the teenage phase, and trust me, I
But God
know.
bless you, Drew.
I know. I'm surviving. Not always
I'm sure you
thriving.
are. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough, but I'm here for the challenge. I'm up for the challenge, and it's all an adventure in the end. But it's really cool. Your parents, taught you some values, and I think we go through adversity, and that adversity kind of helps to mold us
Shapes
into who
us.
we are, and we grow from it if you choose to grow from it, right? So tell
Yeah.
me how did your entrepreneurial journey begin? Like what did you feel called to first? Like where did you go
Yeah.
and feel called to help people?
Yeah. So I went to school for theater. I became
Mm.
a thespian in high school because I was such an outcast and I found all the thespian nerds and they were my people and
Hmm.
really fell in love with that art. And so I went to college for acting. And I like to say when I graduated college, I knew how to do two things really well: wait tables and be dramatic. That was about it. I
Yeah.
failed all my electives. I didn't fail them, but I didn't do well in much else. I was, really great at being an actor. And I lived the artist life for 5 years before I stumbled
Hmm.
into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
I didn't really have literally any business background. And I met a girl that we became fast friends at the gym. And we ended up going into business together after we had been friends for 3 months. I don't recommend doing that with going into business with someone you barely know. But all that to
Yeah.
say, we uh, we fell in love with like going out and trying new restaurants and shopping and going to events. And we were like, there's no online platform for women in the city. And I was in Chicago at the time.
Mm.
And so we decided to do what a lot of entrepreneurs do: is create the solution to the problem we felt we had, and we started this online platform that became the largest online digital magazine for women in the city of Chicago for
Whoa.
7 years. So that was sort of my accidental foray into
Mm.
entrepreneurship. School of Hard Knocks got my real life MBA, failed that business
Mm.
at the end. And it obviously humbled me and broke me. And from that, I broke through to a whole new level of really knowing how to run a business at 33, 7 years later. But that was my first venture into the world of entrepreneurship, which, when you're an actor, I often say you're really not in control of your destiny.
True. So
Producer
true.
is, casting director is, and you're an instrument as an actor in someone else's orchestra,
Yeah.
whether that's a movie, a play, a commercial. So I was sort of done with that. And when I got into entrepreneurship, I was like, I get to be the conductor now. I get to control my destiny with this thing called running my own business. And I've never looked back.
So, quick question for you. When did you know your acting career was over and that you wanted to be an
Mm,
entrepreneur? And the reason I ask that is because there's so many people out there who the toughest choice in life is to know when to keep trying harder or to give
yes.
up and pivot, if you will, because
Yes.
whether it's marriage or relationships or jobs. When did you
Yes.
know, like, hey, I'm going this direction now instead of like, if I just stick it out for another year, maybe I could have gotten this role. You know what I'm saying?
That's so perfect. I love this
Hmm.
question. I remember 5.5 years out of college, I'd been doing the acting thing. I got a lot of work as an actor. I did a ton of commercials,
Oh, cool.
voiceovers, films, plays. And I remember being at a restaurant and my agent texting me saying, I have an audition for you, because she would do that all the time. And
Yep.
I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Like, I don't want to go. I don't want to, this feels so uninspiring and heavy. And I, I give credit to actors. It's such a beautiful experience to follow that path, but you have to be so incredible. Like, that's the only thing that you ever see yourself doing. And it's also important to note too, hmm, when I graduated from college, I had gained a lot of weight in college, and
Mm.
I was immediately told upon graduating that if I wanted to be a serious actress, I had to lose weight.
Uh,
And I
of
was
course.
23 years right. And I was 23 years old, and I started losing weight. I became obsessed with losing weight. I became so thin in my 20s that I didn't get my period for 2 years.
Man.
Um, and I remember, because I have I guess you could call it a pretty face. I wouldn't necessarily, but but I'm
You have a pretty
short,
face, Jessica. Yes.
but I'm short and I'm curvy.
Mm.
And my agent, as soon as I started losing weight, was sending me on auditions with models, like
Oh,
real models that were like 5'11" and bone thin, and I was 5'5" and a size 4 or size 6, and eventually a size 2 and a 0, but I still wasn't a model, and I was
yeah,
being cast against these women that were just insanely perfect looking.
yeah.
And so that was just fuckery for my entire 20s. And I remember having made the decision to like leave acting. So I want to answer this part of your
Sure.
question, like, how did I know? And I was at dinner, and I was like, I think I'm going to order what I want. I think I'm going to eat what I want now.
Yeah.
So
Bring it
that was
on.
also very motivating. Yes, yes,
Yeah. That's so
yes.
interesting, and it's very sad, unfortunately, that that's kind of like, and I get that's how it is sometimes. I've heard other stories about Hollywood and other industries where it is about
Yeah,
your looks, and I think that's
yeah,
what's hard about so many people. We buy into this myth at some point that we are our body image, and we create an identity
yes,
around our body image as our self image, whether you're an actor or a model or fitness, in the fitness industry or whatever it is. So many people create an identity around their body image, thinking like, this is who I am, and like, if I'm not this, then who am I, right? And it's hard
correct.
to learn to detach from that. And I would suspect that there's probably been some humbling experiences for you to outgrow that mentality of your body image
Yes,
as your self image. We won't dive
yes,
too deep into that, but I'm I'm assuming you've had some experiences that have helped you. Maybe for the women out there listening, I'm assuming there was some hardships with your body dysmorphia, if you want to call it that. Like, how did you
yes.
outgrow that, or some techniques that helps
Hmm.
you overcome that?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter in my new book called
Awesome.
my new book, The Light Work. But one of my favorite chapters in the book is called "Body, Your Sacred Vessel."
Mm,
And in my 20s, I battled body dysmorphia and orthorexia. In my 30s, I dealt with an autoimmune disease. So my body and me have been at war for a long time. And if I'm going to be honest, I'm 42. It wasn't until my late 30s
mm,
that I finally began to love my body, not for what it looks like, but for what it does for me,
love
and
that.
to really honor it as sacred technology. Like, we're made of like DNA that is like made of electricity and light, and it's building a right, I call it a right relationship, like learning how to listen to it, learning how to honor it, learning how to have gratitude for it, which allows us to love it and appreciate it. And I've also built myself and know that my value isn't in what I look like, it's in who I am, and my body is the home
Yeah.
of my soul, and it's my only home, it's my temple. And so I've really changed my doctors. I
Mm,
kind of ditched Western medicine. If I'm going to be honest, it failed me with my autoimmune disease at an epic scale. I was
mm,
sick for 9 years because Western medicine just didn't have the right direction for me. And I turned to holistic healers who empowered me that I am my own healer. No one is the guru but me.
yeah.
And have softened how I work out. I don't take Barry's boot camp and soul cycle and marathon run anymore. I do Pilates and I walk,
Yeah, yeah,
I I eat what I want. I have, a healthier relationship with food. So there's a lot of tweaks and changes I've made, but I think the biggest unlock was just recognizing that my body is sacred and
yeah.
it doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters how I honor it and how it feels.
Yeah. That's a beautiful switch of mentality to go from one to the other, and I think it's so freeing when you get to that point. And unfortunately for people like you and I, it took us into like 30s, and 40s to figure out like, oh, this is so much healthier and happier. And I'm healthier and happier in my body when I don't look at it as a punishment or a chore to
Yes.
exercise and eat healthy. And sometimes it takes,
Yes.
being on the other extreme to finally
Yes.
recognize it. But my hope is to break that cycle, being a dad of two daughters, like teaching my girls that they are more than just their body. Like my oldest daughter likes to work out with me, but I don't make her
Mm,
go. She invites me to go with her. But she has a healthy relationship, realizing it's more so about her mental health. Like she realizes her anxiety is better and she feels better mentally when she goes to the gym. So yeah, I hope that the next generation can learn at a younger age, and
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say yes. And like I said earlier, God bless you for raising that's such a challenging time, but it's so beautiful to hear you raising a future generation of women who I don't know have different conscious level parents than
Yeah.
than some of us did, and really teaching women from a very young age that they're beautiful the way they are. And
Yeah.
it's hard with this society and social media. I get that, but
Yeah.
you've got the most important job in the world, Drew.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I take it seriously. And luckily, I have a great co parent. Their mom is awesome as well. We're both on the same page and we both work on ourselves really hard to
Yeah.
break that cycle. And that's the important thing. I think, there's a lot of things I would like to say about like women in our society. In my opinion, women have it so much harder than men do when it comes to body image and looks because
Yeah.
there's so much value in our society placed on physical appearance, and there is. And for women, they're judged more harshly than men are. Men can be huskier, chubbier, bigger build, and it's acceptable. But if a woman has too much makeup or not enough makeup, or too big or too
Oh my
skinny or
God.
too muscular or too this or too that, the list goes on, and you'll never please anyone if you keep trying to please everyone, and learning how to like love yourself. And I think the biggest thing is finding your worthiness within. Like I can't tell you, you can't tell people, no matter who it is from an outside source, it has to be from within for them
From
to start to
within.
believe that. And when you start to believe that, you start to show up differently for yourself. You want to treat your body differently, like kind of like what you're doing. I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I would love to kind of go back to your story a little bit, and we'll come back to this topic because I could talk about this for
Mhm.
hours. But
Sure.
so after the Chicago thing, the 7 years of like the magazine for women, tell us about where you went after that. What direction did you go
So the business
in?
failed.
Okay.
And I ended up in a lot of financial scarcity and
Okay.
debt. And I was 33 years old when I had to ask my parents to help me pay my phone bill. I mean, there was a lot of shame at that
Yeah.
chapter. Even though I had built this beautiful business from the outside in, inside it was just a mess. And so I had to really lick my wounds for a couple years. And what I mean by that, Drew, is I had to go take a corporate job
Yeah.
and pay off my debt and get my life back together. And I always knew I was going to start another company. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I'm glad I went into corporate America. I realized it not for me. I learned, a whole
Yeah.
new side of life there, but got the idea to start Simply Be Agency, which is inspired by this little tattoo on my wrist,
Mm.
right around this kind of breakdown, pivotal, rock bottom, financial scarcity moment. I had actually had a nervous breakdown one day and
Wow.
looked down at my wrist, and I heard my higher self say to me, you're going to go start something new one day. And when you do, you've got to name it Simply Be. It doesn't matter what it is, but let that be the reminder to always be in your truth, because I was so, towards the end of my magazine, just so out of alignment.
Yeah.
And that was what had caused the financial scarcity. That was what caused the autoimmune disease, all of that stress and all of that anxiety. And so after I got enough, courage to quit that job, like, entrepreneurs were all a little insane. I just, I failed a business. I'm like, let's do it again. Let's try it again. And I
Sure.
started Simply Be Agency 7 years ago, and 7.5 years ago, you know, really just wanting to help people with their personal brands. I had a background in marketing. I love people. I'm like, I can combine these things. This was in 2017, kind of right at the dawn of like Gary Vee, when everyone was
Yep.
like, maybe I should get on social media. And so it was like striking when the iron was hot for
Yeah.
sure. And I hit $1 million in revenue like within a
Wow.
year and a half after quitting my corporate job. So it was just like a rocket ship, and I ended up growing that business to a multi seven figure business,
Wow.
and built a 30-person team in less than 5 years. Opened up 2 offices, got a book deal, launched a podcast, like all the things like check
Yeah.
check check that you aspire to have. And I bring up the part of my parents helping me pay my phone bill and like having true financial scarcity that lived in my body. Like I had a
Mm.
trauma response from like bottoming out financially, of course. And I was pretty unconscious to that trauma response in my body, because 2 years later I was making $1 million. I was like, oh, I'm finally in abundance. And while that business was beautiful, Simply Be Agency, I just actually sold the company 6 months ago. Um, it burned me out
Yeah.
really bad. I really talk very openly about my burnout story because I think all people experience burnout. It is such an epidemic. And from that, really, like 2022 was probably the worst year of my life. And
Mm.
it was a turning point for me to honestly heal like generational trauma and like really look at my ish. And it was from that healing turning point that I wrote my second book. And
Yeah.
I'm really stepping out with this new message about how we live our light, and it's usually found in our dark.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's unique that your dark was at kind of a a top moment for most people, right? Where you had all the
Yep.
success and you think, oh, that's. I just posted a reel today, the Tony Robbins quote: "Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure," and that means a lot to me because it doesn't mean you don't chase after success. It just means like what brings you fulfillment, because success doesn't guarantee fulfillment, right? And
Nope,
so I'm
it
very
doesn't.
curious to know what was missing from your life at that time when you had so much abundance and you were, because most people would think, oh, you're doing all the right things, you're being blessed, you're like you're
Mm,
you're having this abundance happen. What was what was the missing link, or what was missing for you that you eventually
mm.
discovered?
Such a beautiful question. I really never felt safe.
Mm.
I was operating from a place of fear and survival.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us do that unconsciously. I myself have a podcast. It's called The Spiritual Hustler, because I
Love it.
love to
Love it.
work. I love to make money. I love to like, right? Thank
Yeah.
you. And I want to teach my community how to be in abundance from a new vibration.
Yeah.
And it needs to start with knowing and trusting that we are safe and provided for, that we're not going to be chased by a tiger like our ancestors were. We're not going to live, in poverty like our grandparents did in the Great Depression. Like those things live in our bodies still. We carry it over in our DNA. And I was operating from a paradigm of survival during those years. Um, I would also say that I was so tired, Drew.
Mm.
I just I was working 100-hour weeks.
Yeah.
I was on all the time. I didn't really value rest as a sacred practice. My nervous system, from like the coffee, the notifications, the calls, the traffic, like the going, like my nervous system was shot.
Yeah.
And I was just like riding over it 100 miles an hour. And I have a whole new set of tools today. I have a whole new lifestyle, frankly, um, that allows me to actually thrive.
Yeah.
So I love the question, like you're all in abundance, but like what was missing? Like that was missing.
Yeah.
And the awareness of like, oh, just because I'm quote unquote in abundance,
Yeah.
I'm actually just running from scarcity all the time. I'm running away from being broke again.
Okay.
And I hadn't fully integrated and healed that
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because I think that can resonate with a lot of people because I think people's perception of success is like, oh, if I just get this, then I'll be happy. If I get the money, if I get the fame, the power, the body, all the outside things that we think this world can provide us with happiness, we get it. And even when you get it, it doesn't mean that you're going to be fulfilled. And I think most people are disappointed, even in the health and fitness industry. Of like, I achieved this amazing body and lost all this weight, but I still don't like myself, and I'm still depressed, and I'm still sad. And it's like, oh, I got
Yeah.
this money or this house or this, all these things that we think are gonna bring fulfillment, and um, it's not until we discover how to provide that from within, not an outside source.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
really curious to know how you got into um, like how did the book start, and where did you go on your healing journey? Tell us about how all of that, so that we kind of understand where the book came from.
Yeah. So how woo woo can I get with you, Drew?
We can go woo woo.
None.
We can go woo woo.
Okay,
If I need to
great.
translate to my audience, I can help translate.
I can help you too.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
pretty digestible is what I try to be, but
Yeah.
um I've been on the spiritual journey since I was, 19. I'm very committed to my spiritual practice. I've been kind of in the spiritual closet, frankly, with all the things that I believe in and, practice. But what was a big pivotal moment for this book, The Light Work, was a trip that I took at the end of 22. So I told you that was the hardest and darkest year of my life. At the end of that year, I had serendipitously, very divinely planned a trip to Egypt.
Mm,
And Egypt, I've been all over the world. I've been to 35 countries. It's a passion of mine is to travel. And I've never been to a place like Egypt. And that country is a direct portal into the cosmos. And
mm,
I talk a lot about this in my book in extensive detail. So I'll try to be sufficient. But I had an experience in one of those temples. I had an experience in many temples because you go through like temple after temple after temple.
yeah.
And in one of those temples, towards the end of the trip, was the temple of Hathor, also known as Dendera, and she's the goddess of bliss.
Okay.
And in one of those rooms in her temple, I was by myself, and I closed my eyes and I pressed my whole body up against the wall, kind of like this. And within a matter of seconds, I got struck by white lightning. And the thing about Egypt is like these stories sound crazy, like not true, or like you were
Hmm.
maybe were you on drugs, Jessica? Like no, like coherent. Happened to have this happen to me, and
Hmm.
it was in that experience at Dendera's temple that I had just this huge activation. Started hearing all of these voices. My body dissolved. I got all of this information, and essentially, like I say, I died in that moment. Like I had a full on identity death in that moment. And one of the things that those spirits said to me in that temple, those many voices, were, uh, Jessica, you have missed the memo when it comes to this human experience.
Hmm.
It is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun. You're not enjoying it. You
Yeah.
have such a blessing to be in this human body. And they were like, literally, they said things to me like, you get to kiss your puppies and have sex and eat chocolate and wear cute clothes and travel the world. Like the fact that you don't enjoy every moment of every day, like it's such a tragedy.
Yeah.
And to go and live your life with joy is your job. And so it was from that place that I came home from that trip. It was a very intense 15 days. I was a different version of myself than the woman who walked on that plane 2 weeks earlier to Cairo.
Yep.
And I went on this very deep healing journey to really, quite honestly, unhook myself from the matrix, what I
Hmm.
call the matrix, this
Yeah.
hologram that we have to like always win, always hustle, always be on. to live in this vibration of never enoughness, to like miss the present moment and just simply enjoy our lives. And I've made that a dedication, a sacred practice, a devotion to have as much joy as I possibly can. And it was from that open space I was able to write this book called The Light Work, which isn't all about joy. It's a lot of dark stuff. I actually think this book could be called The Dark Work because
Dark
it's
work, yeah.
all about the aspects of human life that we all are up against, that break us, that challenge us. And when we do this work called the light work, we become unstoppable. Actually, we become fully empowered. And yeah, it's been a very interesting past 2 years. I look different. I do different things. I sound different. Like I died and was reborn, and it was not always, beautiful, but it's
Yeah.
been, where I think I was always meant to go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Here's the thing: when it comes to spiritual experiences, in my opinion, I come from a very, dogmatic, strict religion growing up, Christian religion that, I was in fully in for like 30 plus years. And I've heard people bear their testimony of spiritual experiences within that religion. But then now that I'm out of it, I don't subscribe to that religion or any religion necessarily. I can still listen to someone's spiritual experience with reverence because I believe people when they tell me they've had an experience, whether it's your
Yeah,
experience or people in other religions, they've had experiences. I believe them because those experiences shape their beliefs. And that was a powerful, pivotal moment for you to go through this
yeah,
ego death, if you will, and then to be reborn again in this new version of you with a new
yeah,
direction, new purpose, and maybe connecting to your higher self, if you will. And
absolutely,
I believe
absolutely.
people when they say that, and like it's really beautiful to hear, and that's kind of where your path led, and now you're able to help other people through what you've experienced and the tools and techniques you used. So I really
Thank
would
you.
love to take some time, if we can, to dive into the book and like what can people expect
Yeah,
from it, what can people take away that would help them on, that would be you know help, that would actually help them on their journey.
yeah. So I call my book a spiritual empowerment book for
Mm,
the most likely modern day person who is hyper performing and hyper vigilant and has experienced pain, trauma, failure, heartbreak across family, romantic relationships, friendships, business, and really takes people in to the, I think, deepest depths of themselves. My book is not a light book. It's a very raw and personal book that is going to make you feel, hopefully, not hopefully, I know that you are not alone, that you are not crazy, that you are absolutely needed here in this world to be yourself. And I really have unpacked this journey in the book in three sections. The first is inner light,
mm,
the second is outer light, and the third is future light. And inner light is all around how we form a relationship with the divine, how we call, whatever you want to call God, source, the universe, really reminding the readers that they are the ultimate source. We're all pieces of the divine, really walking them through how to master their feelings, like to feel their feelings, that our inner light is um, critical to our emotional experience, our personal power, our relationships with our bodies. Outer light is where our light gets tested the most, with our parents, with our siblings, with our partners, with our friends, and with our work.
yeah,
And then future light is all about, I say this all the time, if like we only live lives that are, for our own gain, like what is the point?
yeah,
Like we're all part of the human collective, and we're creating a world that your daughters are going to inherit right now. And so if we don't think about our impact on the future based on how we're showing up today, we have really done the world a huge disservice. And so the last section of the book really focuses on how we treat the planet, how we treat, um, future leaders. I have a chapter on mentorship. I have a whole chapter on how to design your mission, which I think is different than your purpose. I say your purpose is what you do, your mission is who you are, and really getting clear on like what's the bigger game you've come here to play. And so it's a very comprehensive book. I was on a podcast earlier and she asked me a very similar question. I'm like, I've done like all these podcasts on this book and I
yeah.
I still don't have my elevator pitch down for this book because it's so nuanced,
Yeah.
there's so many pieces to it. But yeah, I'm very excited for people to get their hands on it.
And that's why I think podcasts are a great platform to be able to go deep and talk, like have real
Yeah.
conversations instead of like, hey, we got a 2 minute segment on the news here. What are you gonna say about your book that's really gonna sell people or get them excited about it? That's why I love this format because we can just like talk as friends and it's like, tell me about this. I'm curious about this, and how does that work? So really quick, the inner work, right? For
Yeah.
me, one of the questions that comes up, and I don't know if you cover this, is like helping people realize, okay, what is their, because there's all these parts to us, right? Like we're sometimes I feel like everyone is like has multiple personalities, right? Which we all kind of do in a sense. But like, how do we know which voice inside our head is the inner or our higher self, if you will? And how do
Mm.
you connect to that? And how do you know that's like, your higher self versus this other part
Mm.
of you that just wants this thing in this moment of time?
Yeah.
Like whether it's, going after this career or that career or, whatever it is, like, how do we know what our,
Mm.
like, that voice of our higher self is?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer the second part of the question first. How do
Hmm.
we find it? How do we connect to it? And I think it's really important that we create sacred, silent space to go within, just simply sit and be with ourselves, whether that's sitting on a meditation pillow, which isn't for everybody, or taking a
Hmm.
walk in nature, taking a trip by yourself where we can hear our own thoughts.
Yeah.
I had never heard the voice of my higher self until I had to take a month off of work in my 30s when I had my autoimmune disorder, and I had surgery and I was healing, and I was like sitting with myself for a month, and that's when I had one of the biggest breakthroughs of my life because I was finally able to just simply hear myself.
Mm.
And when you hear the voice of your higher self, it just feels so uh, true.
Yeah.
It feels like home.
Yeah.
It feels like a voice you've always known, like for eternity. And the key is to listen. That's also like step two, is to actually like take the information and like have it live within you, not necessarily to make an action tomorrow, but just to really work with that information, work it out inside of you. I think is got to give yourself that time to process whatever it is that you hear.
Yeah.
I'm just a big fan of solitude. And going back to your question and going back to joy,
Yeah.
like what what lights you up? Like where do you feel the most truly embodied in your joy? What like really sets your soul on fire? And I say that when we're in joy, because joy is a frequency, joy is an energy that gets us into a state of alignment with our true selves. When we are truly embodied, we become magnetic from that state. We when we're magnetic, we manifest and attract. We flow. There's I think so much power in joy as a tool, but we can't know what lights us up and what brings us joy if we're riding over the constancy of life and the busyness of our schedules. Just to really just sit with yourself,
Yeah.
and it's hard, but it is, I think, for me at least, that's how I have found my higher self, when I've taken space enough to clear the noise
Yeah.
and get the information, be with that information. Usually that's the information I need to know, and actually apply it. And that's hard too, but I don't think there's anything more worthy than dedicating your life to than
Yeah.
living your truth.
Yeah, I think that's so important, so valuable. It reminds me of that book by Ryan Holiday, Stillness is the Key. And I think our society just has lost the ability to sit still.
Oh
Like
my
like
God.
we just, we're so ADHD, all of us, with social media and our phones, and it's hard just to like sit in silence. And that's where you find your higher self, is being alone in nature, being alone with your thoughts, traveling by yourself, like those kinds of
Absolutely.
things. We just don't, we're always constantly distracted. We always need to be entertained. We don't want to just sit there
Yeah.
and be still. And so I think having a practice, whether it's meditation or getting out in nature or traveling, like you said, journaling, those kinds of things, breath work, those kinds of things can really help, silence the mind, so that you have some time to really connect to your higher self. Like, what is right for me, and like which
Yes.
direction should I go in? And that goes for anyone, whether you're religious or not. Because I remember back when I was religious, like praying, you would pray and then you'd go about your day, and there's not a lot of sitting still and listening,
Yeah.
to any answers, or you're just like, right to the next thing. So I love that answer. I think it's super valuable and super important. Um,
Thank you.
so Jessica, when does the book launch, and where can people find it when it does launch?
The book launches on August 6th. They can go to thelightworkbook.com, which is, you can go to Amazon, Barnes and
Yeah.
Noble, all the bookstores, buy it. Please go wherever you want to go. But if you do go to thelightworkbook.com and you enter in your order number,
Mm.
I'll send you over $3,000 worth of free bonuses.
Well.
Why wouldn't you do that? And you also get an invitation to, I'm hosting a beautiful massive live stream global summit with Michael Beckwith, Koya
Oh.
Webb, Daniel Page, just some amazing, amazing thought leaders on Lionsgate, which is August 8th, 8/8. It's a very auspicious day when it comes to abundance and limitless potential and wealth creation. It's a very powerful day. It's 8 is the number of money and an
Yeah.
infinite possibilities. And when you buy the book on thelightworkbook.com, you get a ticket to that event as part of your
Oh,
order.
so cool. Yeah, I know. I've heard of some of those names, and that sounds like
They're
a really
amazing.
powerful
Yeah.
event. So we'll make sure and have that in the show notes, and put the links as well. So, just wrapping up, Jessica, what's one thing you would love to, or maybe two things you would love to leave with the audience, if you could, something that's
Mm.
super important to you, that's like part of your core values that you think can help
Mhm.
a lot of people?
I love this question. I going back to my spiritual side, I really want people to realize and remember that they didn't incarnate here
Mhm.
in this body called them for this very, very short amount of time, actually, in the grand scheme of the infinite, by accident. They were put here for a very divine assignment, not just a reason we hear that, but like an assignment that it's their job to fully live in their truth. It's their job to fully live in their light, to shine unapologetically, to be the example of an authentic life to the others that they touch. That act is so needed right now in humanity, for people to really live from this state of truth and love and connection and humanity. And it's like our responsibility to do that, actually, and to don't take for granted just how powerful you are. And the second thing I would say is, when you come into spaces like this where you're listening to Drew and I talk, it's like, wow, that's cool. She built a business. He has got a podcast. He's a New York Times bestselling author. Like, no one is on a pedestal. Like, we're all
Yeah.
just people. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has value to give to the world. Don't make anyone your guru. Like, you are your own guru. And to trust that, people need what you've got, and to give it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate your words and your wisdom as well, and sharing that with all of us, especially me. I can take a lot of these things to heart, and definitely need to apply some of these things as I'm going through this. It's interesting, the parallels between your journey and some of my journey. So I appreciate you
Wow.
sharing what's worked for you, Jessica. But I appreciate you coming on. We'll put all the links to the show notes, and your Instagram, is it just your name, or is it?
It's at
Okay.
Jessica Zweig. Yeah, come
Okay.
say hi to me if you're
Okay.
a fan of Drew. Thank you so much for having me.
It was my pleasure. It really was. Thank you so much, Jessica, and we'll be in touch. Talk to you soon.
Sounds amazing. Thank you.
Okay.
Go!